All right, guys. Welcome to another sunny day here in crypto land. And today we've got one um, fellow founder and lead alpha analyst, Alpha Mutants NFT. And today we're basically going to just do a market as it stands. So we're going to talk about a few things today, some topics that have uh, come up recently in the markets, and just get some of Nate's takes on it. We'll talk about a few different things, what we can be doing currently, the best places to be putting your funds, and how to protect your funds during this market fluctuation and volatility that we've got going on. So we'll start with that today. But anyway, in the past week, we've seen some really crazy stuff go on. Almost many people would call it a black swan event with the depegging of the UST stablecoin on the Terra network and the avalanche that ensued from that. Luna taking a massive 99.99% plunge in price. And now a lot of speculation going on as to what the future is of that particular blockchain. So we'll talk about that for a little bit. And then we've also had some news in the NFT space. The founder of one of the more popular blue chip NFTs, or supposed blue chip NFTs, in Azuki, had a lot of information coming out about kind of soft rug pull projects that had happened in the past that they've been involved in, and some other allegations that had kind of circulated across crypto Twitter and things of that nature. So not a lot of great feel good stories this week, but we want to cover those non feel good stories, and you want to know what to do in the bad times as well as the good times. So we've got Nate on here. Nate is the head alpha analyst and co-founder of Alpha Mutants, and he spends a lot of his time looking into trends in the market and what's hot and what's not hot, and just analyzing plays in crypto, as far as in cryptocurrencies, but also in the NFT space, and so we're going to talk to him about some of that stuff. So, Nate, I think the biggest thing on everybody's mind, like the last week or so, has been Terra Luna and UST, and just the turmoil and everything crazy that's going on with that. What's your feelings about that currently? And what did you think when the initial depeg happened and that cascade that came after it? Like, what was your initial thoughts? What was going through your head those first 24, 48 hours?
Luckily, I myself personally, I didn't have a ton in that ecosystem just because it's so early on days, in my opinion. I think it's one of those up and coming ecosystems that's, in the next few years, it'll be big. Obviously, this really set it back quite a bit, in my opinion. It's going to take a while to not only just recover price wise, but just to recover from, the turmoil of what happened, because it takes a lot of time to get that sour taste out of people's mouths. But personally, like, I'll be honest, that's the fastest I've ever seen just a top, even I will say 500 coin dip that quick. I mean, that was quite insane to watch. And I thought about putting more money in, when it was $1, $2, just more moonshot thing. And like, I didn't think it was going to even keep going down from there. And it did. But I mean, from my own personal perspective, aside from just price wise, what happens, that has a big ripple effect that more people probably don't realize across all of Web3 space, and how that ties into with the whole regulation as far as stable coins and stuff. Because most people, let's be honest, most people in the space probably don't even truly understand what algorithmic stable coins are compared to your traditional stable coins. And so it just gives a bad taste, I think, in everybody's mouth. And, a lot of people come into the space and think, oh, Tether is a safe place to keep my money. It is when you consider what just happened, but to a certain point, it's like you have to understand the fundamentals of what goes behind every single one of these protocols, not just from a stablecoin perspective, but from all of Web3. across the board. Because if you don't understand the fundamentals, you're not going to understand why it failed the way it did, or why these other things like USDC are the places to park it. And I think I have tools that are available nowadays that when you and I had coming up, throughout the crypto space. And I think utilizing those tools and utilizing those people around you is a big thing. But dig a little on this type of stuff and understand what effect it has on the market, because this will affect not just stable coins across the board, but this is going to affect all of Web3. So I mean, my personal opinion, luckily I wasn't so far down the rabbit hole and got burned on this thing. But this will set the whole space back years if it's not played and handled correctly going forward. So I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway that I would want to shed some light on for everybody is,
well, I'm interested in specifically, you're kind of you were talking there about like just the ripple effects that something like this can have, because I don't think many people would have foreseen such a black swan event, because we're not talking about a fly by night thing here. I mean, this wasn't like a coin that just came out 2 days ago, right? This was a proven, tested ecosystem. I mean, it's still very young, obviously, but no one, I don't think, expected that level of crash. There had been plenty of people that had spoke of the inability to continue anchor protocols, 19.5% yields and everything. There was even a schedule for a reduction of that over the next 6-7 months, but I don't think anyone kind of foresaw the crash here. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is just what you mentioned there, is that there are repercussions for this across the entire space, right? Because we saw immediately after this that we started hearing more questions being thrown at Tether, for example, right? Literally within 24, 48 hours, there was questions coming in at Tether. We had a statement from Janet Yellen talking about like we definitely need regulations now. So two other questions I want to ask you about this. So are you of the mindset that there's a lot of stories going out, not a lot of stuff verified, but are you of the mindset that this potentially could have been it obviously was a coordinated attack, but are you of the mindset that this could have been potentially like government coordinated or with government sanction to kind of give a stepping stone or a building block to lead into regulation on stable coins? Or do you think that it was just someone that saw a vulnerability out there with a lot of cash that decided to take advantage of it? I mean, what's your take on that thus far?
That's a good question. And like, I don't like to go down the conspiracy theory, rabbit hole, because that we could turn that into 10 podcasts if we wanted. But,
right.
I do think that there's merit to both sides of that. And I do think that there's probably some of that in play on both sides. If you go back and look at the history of this thing, governments, the US government in particular, has been trying to fight stable coins in particular. I've been trying to fight everything, but stable coins in particular have been under the gun, primarily because of the threat that they pose to the traditional finance system. And when anybody can come on here, and in their mind, in most people's mind, anybody can come on here and create a coin and call it, X. And that's the part of the problem with the algorithmic stable coins is you're not truly backing it at a $1-to-1 dollar. So, anybody can come up with these algorithms. We've seen the depegging of stuff. We've seen the true backing of stable coins. And so when you talk about that, no matter how you want to spin it, stable coins in general, just the term, have always posed a problem for the traditional financial markets. I mean, you're essentially cutting out the middleman altogether. And you're providing an opportunity for people to move in and out of cash significantly faster than they could in any sort of traditional market. So there's always an opportunity for them to try and regulate that. And you can bet that they're going to regulate it heavily wherever they can. And if you haven't followed most of the news over the past few years, obviously they haven't made a ton of progress on that. I mean, because it's two sides. You've got people that advocate for it and advocate against it. And part of it is, they're aware that you don't want to stifle innovation by imposing too much protocols and regulation on it. And that's what happens where you see other countries that allow free reign on it. And obviously the innovation is not stifled at all by any means. But then again, you also have opportunities for bad actors and all that stuff. So you have to find the balance. I'm of that notion that there has to be some regulation. If there's not, it's never going to succeed. But with that, I do believe that there's also that flip side to where, people, and we're seeing it more heavily these days in the space, people will always try and game the system where they can, especially in this, because it still is the wild, wild west to a certain degree. And there's always going to be, fluke protocols and security measures and stuff that just are allow bad actors to enter the space. And, this one is particularly unique because it wasn't a flaw in the protocol itself. It was, it was somebody that found a loophole and gamed it to their method. It wasn't that the protocol itself failed, which if that was the case, we would be talking about a totally different, circumstance here.
I thought it was once I'd actually jumped in the rabbit hole and actually looked at I even looked at some of the on-chain transactions and stuff, and just the timing of all of that. The crazy part was that if the timing of the attack was so fortuitous, and it had to be something that was being watched, because if they had allowed them to upgrade the liquidity pool another couple weeks, it probably would have been impossible. Right. So it was obviously well timed and everything. And it's one of the things that breaks my heart about the whole situation is because, the technology behind that chain itself, the Terra Luna chain is fantastic technology. And I feel like, it's kind of sad knowing that this will be a setback. So one thing I did want to ask you is that there's currently a couple propositions as far as like what to do going forward, because the DPEG it's obvious at this point that the peg isn't going to be restored, right? There's just not enough funds there to do what needs to be done. So one of the proposals, I don't know if you've kept up with it, but is that they do a hard fork, something similar to Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, right? Back in the day. So and they just fork the chain itself, and the Luna Classic, I believe, would be basically a reset of the Luna chain without the UST stablecoin, right? So that's one of the propositions, and both chains continue to live on. One of the other propositions is that the Luna Foundation burns as much Luna as physically possible, and they just continue on with the next chain. But I mean, in your mind, does it make more sense for them to do a fork or to continue to try to find some way to either burn or somehow get some kind of assistance to try to continue to fight for the peg? What do you foresee as the better course of action for the protocol currently?
Man, that's always a tricky question, to be honest. I mean, and let me give some background for those people that don't understand the implications of this. So, back in the day, Ethereum itself, what is traditionally today known as Ethereum Classic, got essentially gamed itself, and I think the hacker made away with like 18 million or something on it. The Ethereum community came together and decided to fork the entire chain into what Ethereum is today, and that meant that they rolled the transactions back far enough onto the fork to where it essentially was a snapshot right before all that happened, right? And it was traditionally now adopted, and why you see Ethereum now used in Ethereum Classic is pretty much never used across the board, because the entire community backed it. But there have also been forks that people have used, and they just never gain adoption because the community doesn't back it. So in this circumstance, like, the right thing to do would be to roll the fork back, and to fork the whole thing. And that does a number of things. And to be honest, I haven't followed whether they've completely offloaded all of those, everything they made out with at this, or, because what that happens is if you roll the chain back and you fork it, every coin that they essentially have on that then becomes practically worthless if they haven't already swapped chains. So, it's almost like you're punishing the bad actor and you're returning it to its current state. But the problem with that is you're still never going to return it to everybody's peace of mind to a certain degree, because the entire, and this is my traditional, like, I will say archaic view on Web3 is that, the entire point of it is that it's supposed to be immutable. And when you talk about rolling a chain back, you're essentially controlling the outcome. So my personal preference is I think that they need to. It was a big enough thing that it sets not just their chain back, but the entire ecosystem. But it's always hard because, I'm playing devil's advocate by saying that. So
yeah. It's always a fight between, what is the right way forward between, your maximalists and your purists in the space, and then people that actually want to see the innovation take hold and everything. And I think there's normally a sweet spot. It's normally never an answer all the way to the left or all the way to the right. There's normally somewhere in between that has to be thought about. But yeah, so, well, I mean, great. Thanks for your thoughts on that. And I hope that anyone listening can get kind of a clear idea of what's going on and how these events with Terra has like affected the space and are probably going to continue to affect the space for quite a while to come. But so let's change it up to a little less serious note. So let's talk just a little bit for a few minutes about the NFT space and what's currently going on. Obviously, if anyone's active in the space, that they're aware that volume is down pretty much across the board. We've seen some of the slowest days going in the last couple of weeks that we've seen in forever, and we're seeing a lot of projects just not minting out or new mints. We're seeing a lot of projects stagnate. We're seeing a lot of projects that we thought of as blue chips take 60, 70, 80% hits in prices. What's your take right now currently on the space as a whole, and what do you foresee as in the coming weeks and months? Your personal opinion of what you think we're going to see is in the space. Are we going to see continued downturn in volume, or do you think that there's going to be a relief now that we've seen a little bit of a curve in like some of the announcements as far as like interest rates and things like that? What's your take on it?
It's funny you asked that, because I was actually just looking at the weekly chart on Bitcoin just today. And, I mean, the chart, obviously, if anybody hasn't looked at it, it doesn't look good by any means. I mean, we've seen more red candles throughout the past, month and a half than we have in all of Bitcoin's history. And as much as we'd all like to believe that, Bitcoin is depegged from the traditional markets, and I say Bitcoin, but all of crypto is depegged from traditional markets. That's just not the case. I mean, it's oftentimes some of the most volatile and the first ones to sell off, because most people, whales in these large investment firms that control a large portion of it, they still see it as a speculative asset when in comparison. So it's usually the first one to get offloaded to a certain degree. But with that being said, I mean, the chart looks like we could be moving essentially in range probably till mid-August before we really see a true upside or breakdown. I do believe it'll come significantly faster than, I mean, the way that you just look at the rest of the world and traditional markets in themselves. I mean, the interest rates, they're not sustainable for anybody. The way that we've printed money across the board, just not sustainable. And, the past, I think we can all agree that COVID itself, we all did not expect the run up that the stock market had. And those things have to pull back and take a breather. And if they don't, I mean, you see the repercussions of, and I mean, throughout history, history's a repeating wheel. I mean, it's ironic how much we don't learn from our mistakes, but you see very long bear periods, and that's what's caused by it. And so we're seeing that now. We're seeing the start of a sell-off. So personally, I've turned around and I've pegged everything. Most of my, 90% of my funds across all my wallets to USDC. And this is truly the hardest part, is you just have to be patient. I mean, there's there's discounts across the board by all means, like great projects that are on sale, fire sales now, but you have to turn around and tell yourself, are we out of the clearing? And the answer is, in my opinion, definitely not. If anything, it's probably just getting started. But with that being said, there's a lot of things that actually fuel more downside. And, if anybody that's been in the space for a while knows that anytime there's some bad news, like the Terra collapse, that kind of ecosystem there, it's just fueled by some legitimate news and some not. And that's when you actually find that most of regulation and stuff, you start to see more of the articles coming out shedding a negative light on it. It's because they know that that's the time to capitalize. And when that happens, you just see it's almost like an accelerated sell-off, way more than it needs to. And if you go back and look at Bitcoin's weekly, I think we jumped down to like 25K before we shot right back up. And that was the barrel roll that caused it. It's a massive sell-off of people overreacting. Then everybody gets their footing. Doesn't mean we're not going to touch that again. Absolutely not. But, for the time being, where we've stabilized a little bit, but I do think we continue to see more downside from here for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a pretty much the same mind. I know that's, I run across a thesis that, when you see a market retracement, you see things hit 70%, rundowns, which we've seen in a lot of tech stocks, currently, 60, 70% down. That's ridiculous. And it's crazy. So, at that time frame, when I see those things, there's two mindsets there. There's like, you can start allocating funds, like right now, currently back into tech stocks, because, that the thought process is there could be more downside, but in the long term, the upside far outweighs the downside, right? But you have to be prepared for a very long hold, right? And I feel almost the same way in NFTs. I feel that NFTs and crypto, even, there's a lot of great deals out there. But I think that there's going to potentially be quite a long time period of a time frame where DCAing is going to be possible, and I think that deploying funds during that time frame is going to pay massive dividends. Within the next 2.5 years, when we see another bull cycle run through, we see some of these inflationary fears, work themselves out. But this is the time that tests men's souls, right? Because it's scary, even at these levels. To 6 months ago, being able to buy into Solana at $40, $45, like anyone would have jumped at that, right? And now people are scared to even at those levels, which the fundamentals of these projects haven't changed, right? It's just the market sentiment. So I think that it's and what you personally do inside of the Alpha Mutants Discord is to let people know that that's in these down times, in these recessionary markets, in like this blood in the streets, that this is the time to be calculated, to be patient, to make the right buy-ins, the right plays, and these plays are going to pay dividends over a time frame if you can be patient enough, and if you can pick your entries and those type of things. So that's that. I think we're kind of the same mind there. So one more thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap things up here is, as far as the NFT market goes, is there anything, any ecosystem currently that's like that excites you any at all, or that you've seen that seems to be holding up well in this massive downturn, when we've seen even like projects like Bored Apes even lose like 30-40% in the span of a couple of weeks? Like, is there anything that's kind of like piqued your interest at all, or maybe a trend in the NFT space that you're looking at currently at all?
That's a good question as well. And I'm gonna kind of bleed the two subjects together, because it's interesting that you say tech stocks and like it's good for the fundamental long term. That same mentality has to be said for Web3 in itself. Because when you look at things across the board, by all means, when I say that I think we still see sell off, I don't mean go and just tether everything or whatever you're going to do with it and then just never buy in. No, you want to DCA to the bottom, because nobody knows when the reversal is going to be at. But what I'm saying is that put those money into those solid ecosystem plays, DCA into those. Don't go into these riskier projects, because this is even more 10 times moves, the space moved 10 times faster than the traditional markets, in that, those same things that you minted 2 weeks ago that maybe minted out or whatever, if those teams weren't smart enough to turn around and peg all of the money that they raised to build out their product, this bear market could totally take the project, because they essentially don't have the capital to continue. And the same thing goes with some projects that don't sell out in this period or whatever. Those same projects are not going to be around after this bear market's over, or after the sell-off's over. I mean, they're just not. So you might be buying something which you think is a great buy now, but come 2 months from now, that project may not even be around. And you go back and look at the history of all this stuff back to 2017. The same thing happened. We had a huge run up come December 2017, and then 2018, the entire year was a bear market. And 90% of those projects that sold out in that high never made it past a year, because they just didn't have the capital to go. They didn't have the community or whatever it was. So those things that people think are blue chips now, that, you've seen 30% sell-offs, most of those probably, like Bored Apes, not going away, right? The ecosystem is too big. The community is too strong. But, some of these other ones, and I'm going to throw some names out here, but, by any means, I don't have the crystal ball either. But, the Azukis of the world, the Neo Tokyos, those kind of things are they great ecosystems, or were they great ecosystems? Yeah, but you've seen nothing is going to be immune to this sell-off. But those things that right now they don't have the fundamentals in play, or they just 4 months ago came out of their token sales or whatever. Yeah. Those are the projects that, personally, even if they're classified as blue chips, I would not be getting into them right now. One, because you got two options here. One, you're probably going to be able to get them cheaper in a month or two if we do continue to sell off. But two, again, those may never recover. I mean, what is a blue chip now may not return ever to blue chip status, even if the project lasts. Yeah. And so you have to switch your fundamentality of what was in a bull market versus what is now. And if you can't do that, you're not going to make money. But right now, the things that I would be 100% DCing into, a lot less NFTs right now, but more so into the ecosystems that build the coins. Solana, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polkadot, those type of things, those ecosystems and those infrastructure, everything being built on those is not just going to go away. The same thing with Luna, right? Luna's a great chain. It got hit hard, and yes, it's going to take a long time to recover, but the technology behind it and the ecosystem of everything being built on it, it's not going to go to zero. So those are the places I would be putting my money right now if I was going to start buying back in, because those are the ones that are going to last.
Excellent advice, man. Yeah, excellent advice. Build the whole pick and shovel plays, right? Sometimes it's better to be the guy selling the pick and shovel than the guy looking for, the 1 in a million chance for gold, right?
100%.
Yeah, so I think that's absolutely solid advice, and so where even currently at current prices, some of the L1s are looking so fantastic currently, and like you said, I think there's going to be. Crypto is going to be generous to people during this market. It's going to give plenty of people plenty of time to, DCA into some of these projects. They're going to see instant, 5, 10, 20Xs as soon as we see an up market again. And that may be a few years down the road, but it will come, right? So I think that just having the mentality and the understanding of how the cycles work, and how we are fundamentally the same, right? We're fundamentally the same now as we were a year ago, right? Even better. You see a lot of development on a lot of these chains, so it's really just understanding that and buying the blood over this time frame, and not worrying about it getting exact bottoms, just dollar cost averaging your buy-ins, and really just riding this thing out. If you believe in crypto, if you believe in the mission of Web3, then it should be something easy for you to do. So but anyway, so, I think we covered some great topics. Hopefully we've helped some people out. If anybody wants to hear other calls that Nate makes on NFTs, on just some of his personal plays, what he's doing with his own personal portfolio, or some of the alpha calls that he sees with mints on the NFT front, or with potential buy-ins on the crypto front. You can go to the Alpha Mutants Discord, and there are several channels in there with alpha varying degrees of risk and things of that nature. So he's always in there with his team doing that kind of stuff. But I think it's good advice. I hope everybody took some notes and just really kind of listen. One of the big things in this space is take perspectives. Like, never think that you've got everything figured out, and always be able to listen to the perspectives of other people, and especially people that have been around as long as like Nate has in the space here, and seen these things come and go. He's seen some of these black swan events come and go, and he knows that it may look terrible now, but there is a way to play this to your advantage. Crypto is a fickle mistress sometimes, but she always rewards those that are patient, and that and don't let the FOMO get to them, or the fear get to them, on the extremes of each side. So anyway, Nate, thank you very much for being on today. We'll have Nate back on here, plenty of times with his analysis on different topics. And this is Crypto Kenny, and we'll see you guys next time.